Well, good morning and good afternoon. We are in a different temple space today, and it's got a very loud, echoey, it's amazing. I don't know if that comes over on Zoom, but it's this very large hall with concrete floor, so the sound, and metal ceiling, the sound vibrates. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful altar. Just there. So we don't have two laptops set up today, so it's a shame that we can't all see each other in the Zendo and on Zoom, but we'll solve it eventually. We need to have two different hotspots. That's the new challenge for two laptops. Just recently, a book came out called Throw Yourself into the House of Buddha. And it's about the life and teachings of Tangen Harada Roshi, a teacher that passed away about 5 years ago in Japan. But as he said, he's not going anywhere. But conventionally, he passed away in 2018. And my teacher, Kokyo, studied with him at Bukokuji in Japan. And one of our Sangha members, Rain, also spent some time there some years ago. A much loved and respected teacher. And one of the reasons I feel a fondness for him is because he had many difficult and unusual hardships in his life. And when someone becomes a great teacher and is kind and caring and disciplined and confident and all of those things that we value, like self-love as well as loving everybody else, really embodying, embracing that. When someone's had a difficult life and they can do that, and I just feel a really warm connection to them. Because it's encouraging for us that no matter what hardships befall us in our life, they can be transformative. They don't have to cause us to fall apart in a way that's harmful to ourselves. We can be transformed by our hardships. So, and his hardships kind of started right from the start. I'll read a little bit. The gift of life. I came into this world with a great debt. My mother gave her own life in order to give birth to me. She already had 3 children, and when she was pregnant with me, she was diagnosed with stomach cancer. The doctor urged her to apologize to the baby and have the cancer removed from her stomach. Those around her, my father as well, tried to persuade her to do it, but she stood firm, vowing, "This baby in my belly is going to be born." I was born on August 24, the day that we worship Jizo Bodhisattva. After that, it was too late for the surgery. Just before she died, she very clearly expressed herself to those close to her. "Even after I die, I will care for and protect this child." She must have prayed fiercely for my protection. She died before my first birthday and left me in the care of Jizo Bodhisattva. When I was still very young, when I came to understand what my mother had done for me, I wrote on a piece of paper, "My mother laid down her life for me. What does she mean for me to do? What does she mean for me to do with this gift?" I continuously wondered what it was that I should do with this life. What was my mother telling me? Yet I was terribly dissatisfied as a child. I could not be calm. Of course, I was guided by greed, anger, and ignorance. I was overtaken by wants, creating seeds of pain. I lived immersed in dualistic thinking. It was a miserable childhood. When I was about 12 years old, a deep questioning arose in me. Whenever I felt a touch of wind or looked up at the sky overhead, I would ask myself, what is there deep down beneath the surface of things? When I would eat an orange, for instance, I wouldn't think of its taste or colour, but I would wonder, what is there? There is something I feel but don't understand. I sense its presence, but I can't take hold of it. My inability to answer those questions was a source of such discontentment that I always felt separated from people and things. Around that time, I was playing tennis, and I was good at it. I was asked to join the team. I gave all to my practice. Even in the rain or when it grew dark, I would stay with it. I would ride home on a bicycle after dark, past shops and with their lights shining brightly. The streets were still bustling with people at that time. There were old people, young people, people in between. And as I rode through the streets with groups of people passing under the bright lights, I would be asking myself, there is life, and all these people are living it. But what is this life? There is something. There is something. So it's interesting how he kept this question kind of not knowing about what life is. He kept it alive, even as a young man, as a teenager. It's really, I think, good for us to have this open curiosity about things, not to get too complacent and think that we know. And I think it's wonderful too that having such a childhood, losing his mother that way, that he was able to turn that into something that was a challenge for him rather than becoming maybe weighed down by guilt, which would be another option. One could feel very guilty and not good enough, not up to the task. But he didn't do that. It just made him really question about life. I feel like he must have intuited that his mother really valued life and valued his life. So he needed to really answer that question about what is valuable, why is it valuable? So we're very fortunate that he kept that open curiosity. And then a little later, when he was about 17, I won't read the whole section, I just summarised a little bit of it here. He came across a book that had some points around karma in the book. And a few of the things that were there, one of them was that the fortunes that befall a person, sunshine or shadow, ups and downs, are naturally determined, without one knowing it, by our past actions, virtue and vice. And so this is a line about things happen to us and we don't know why. We can't really understand why things happen to us. You know, some people have a lot of fortunate things happen in their life. Some people have a lot of unfortunate things. Sometimes things go very well for people and then in an incredibly untimely fashion, they suddenly go bad. No, we can't really know why it all happens. But we can probably track to some extent our choices along the way contributed. That there's something in there about being able to kind of accept and roll with the sort of slings and arrows of life and the good fortunes of life, to be able to kind of work with them, have some acceptance of them. But also in that book, there was another line that said that one can take responsibility for the construction of one's own world. Hold on, that's what he said. Hold on, a bit before that. It included a conversation with the Zen master Unkoku, who impressed upon the author that karma is only one side of the picture, that one can take responsibility for the construction of one's own world. It's not a matter of living out one's life wedged into a predetermined mould, but rather by virtue of one's own efforts it is possible to move, even if just a step closer towards one's aims. So the first part about karma is an acceptance of things, the troubles that befall us. And then the second is the sense that we actually have great power. We have this responsibility and we have this capacity. Even if we don't know quite what, we can take one step that is in the direction that is wholesome. We can take a step. Yeah. And then there's a chapter called Be Like a Chair. So after he read that book, he developed this real resolve to try and work with this sense of acceptance and responsibility. And so he then goes on to say, I then resolved to become like a chair. A chair doesn't refuse its services to anyone. It just takes care of the sitter and lets them rest their legs. After it has served its purpose, no one gets up and thanks or gives offerings to the chair. It will more likely get kicked out of the way. The chair doesn't grumble or complain or bear a grudge, but just takes whatever is given. A chair doesn't plop itself down on top of the sitter, right? When there is a job to be done, it puts forth all its energy without picking and choosing according to its desires. I thought, wouldn't it be great to have such a heart? I wrote on a big sheet of paper, be like a chair. And every day I took note of how close I came. If ever a little dissatisfaction arose, I would regard that as a disgraceful state of mind for a chair. I considered how thoroughly I was of use to others. What was positive about all of this was that if I possibly could, I wanted to put others before myself. The endeavour was not at all forced or unnatural. It arose from life itself, and it was enjoyable and not painful. So just thinking about this idea that he was enacting, be like a chair, and thinking about, as he says, a chair is just there and we just sit on it, and then when we get up, we go do something else. Although, of course, in Zendos, we do bow to our cushion. We bow to the Sangha and we bow to the cushion. And sometimes we think of that bowing to the cushion as bowing to ourself and bowing to our own practice. But it also can just be like bowing to the cushion, literally. But generally speaking, people just sit on chairs and take them for granted, and the chair doesn't complain. And so he vowed to be like that, to just give wholeheartedly of himself for the whole of his life, to be of service to others. And I was thinking that to do that, if we were chairs, we would still have to look after ourselves as a chair. Like a chair, a chair needs to get sleep. And a chair needs to have strong legs. So a chair probably needs to get exercise, like go for walks or go for runs. And the chair needs to be strong, so it needs to eat healthy food. And we don't want a chair to get too dusty, so it's good to have a shower occasionally, or go for a swim in the river. So for a chair to be a chair, it needs to look after itself. It doesn't want to have a weak, wobbly legs. It doesn't want to be dusty. It doesn't want to be hungry. Chair needs to care for itself. So we can care for ourselves so that we can provide support for others. Because there's no boundary between ourselves and others. It's just the way we use language and the way things appear in our eyes. But to care for beings, to care for the planet, to care for plants and animals, we have to care for the chair that we are. So we have to do that. And we can do that joyfully and enjoy people making good use of us. It's one of those things that people often don't discover in their life, or maybe till later in their life, just how lovely it is to be of benefit to others. It's such a lovely feeling to help others, to be of benefit to others, whether they particularly appreciate it or not. It's nice when they do show appreciation, so it's probably nice for the cushions that we turn and bow to them. They probably do like that. But it's not necessary. It's still a great joy to be of service to others, whether they know it or not. I often think about that when you see these videos of people helping animals, wild animals. The wild animals sometimes don't show any gratitude. You get them out of the fence, like, I don't know, a deer has its horns stuck in a barbed wire fence or something like that. And people get it out, and then the deer just quickly runs away. It doesn't turn around and say thank you. And that's okay. It's still just as satisfying whether an animal says thank you or not. Whales say thank you. When people help them, they often say thank you. There's a few other things I'd like to read. So it was a while before he actually became formally a Buddhist practitioner. But he had a kind of an awakening experience prior. And I tend to think that this is because he had been so curious and open in his teenagehood. So I'll read a little bit about that. He'd gone for a long hike up a mountain, and he'd been doing some chanting. So he'd been introduced to Buddhist ideas, and he saw a statue of a Buddha, and he did some chanting. And then he says that through chanting, I must have entered into a purer state of mind. Transfixed by the mountain landscape, I was standing just on the edge of a cliff. There I was asking for nothing. I wasn't thinking or analysing. I wasn't adding anything. The wind began to gust up toward me from the valley below. I became enveloped by the wind. I felt as if I was growing bigger and bigger. At that moment, I realised that I was supported by heaven and earth, by all things. I was being told, all things are becoming you, nurturing you. Looking at the mountain was me. The wide, wide valley became me. I realised then that whatever I heard, whatever I saw, everything is always and forever supporting me, caring for me. Happiness gushed from the depths of my belly. My joy was uncontainable. I began to shout my own name at the top of my lungs 7 or 8 times. My name rang out over the horizon, over and over. I could not stay still. It was with unsuppressed joy that I began to race back down the mountain. It could have been dangerous, but my steps were natural, my feet were sure. I sped down the mountain with such force, it was my body moving, but not my own body at the same time. I ran down to the town of Atami, where I boarded the train for home, but my world was changed. Everything was now so intensely intimate. Everything that I encountered was so profoundly close. I remember picking up a small stone beside the path and carefully holding it and turning it in my hands. As I encouraged it to be strong and steady, good. Then I laid it carefully back down on in its place. A bright and changed world unfolded before me. For 1 or 2 months after that experience, everything, down to the pebbles along the roadside, brilliantly glistened. I thought, it is an intimate and friendly life. One other thing I'd like to share is that even though he had this experience, he still yet wasn't fully immersed in the teachings, and so when Japan was at war, he signed up as a soldier. And I'll read just a little bit of what happened. Then the war began. We were told by the government that Japan was in real danger. We had to fight against enemies who were portrayed by military propaganda as if they were devils themselves. My perspective was severely limited. I had the sense that I must give my own life to protect those close to me, my parents, my siblings, my teachers, my friends, my fellow country people. I was still bound, tied down by a false sense of place, attached to boundaries, to us versus them. I believed that there was an enemy, yet I didn't have a sense of wanting to kill or save my own life. I just wanted to give my life to protect others. I volunteered to fly as a kamikaze pilot. My goal in life was already to be of service to others, so sparing my life was not a factor for me. I gave myself to the training that was required. And he goes on to describe it, but I might just, I want to make sure we have some time for some conversation. But what happened was on the day that he was due to fly, the tradition is you have a glass of sake and then you get in the aeroplane ready to fly off. He had drunk his sake and he got in the plane, and then it was announced over the loudspeaker that the war was ended and the war was over. So on the very moment that he was about to fly off to be a kamikaze pilot and to end his life and almost certainly take the lives of quite a few people, the war was ended. And so that didn't happen to him. And he then went into a prisoner of war camp, I think it was in Russia, and there one of the soldiers forced him to drink alcohol with him. He'd not been a drinker of alcohol, forced him to drink alcohol with him and get drunk, and he got so sick that he ended up in hospital. And while he was in hospital, all of his fellow Japanese soldiers were taken away, and I can't quite remember how it says that they died, but they died in some way. And his life was spared yet again. So he had these multiple moments of his life being spared, when at the same time he was willing to lose his life. So all of this became extremely powerful in forming his strong sense of life and what life is, and like we chant in our sutras about time is short, time is short, use it well, and there's also no going anywhere at the same time. So maybe in a couple of weeks, or future weeks, I'll read some more from this book, but I just wanted to share a little, seeing this book just arrived in the mail a few days ago, about this wonderful teacher. and particularly this being like a chair. So I'll end there and turn the recording off and see if anyone would like to